Dude, so good
Yes.
to be back in the pilot seat with you. This is monumentous. Here we are, charging hard, episode 2. We got a lot on our plate today. I don't think we bit off more than we can chew, but maybe we did. I don't know.
I would say bit off more than we can chew in more ways than one because of the topic, and you just never know how sensitive people might be.
Hey.
And because I've been thinking about this since we decided what we were going to talk about next. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, you know what? If you just, in a vacuum, you look at what we're going to talk about and you say, okay, if you can erase all the really, 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 really awful stuff.
It's a lot of reallys.
And then you just look at what was going on, you're just kind of like, oh, kind of cool, kind of
not cool in certain ways.
Well, it's like not cool, but it's the really bad stuff, but like cool in the sense of like how it just like skyrocketed the world forward.
Good pun there. There's going to be a lot of rocket talk tonight.
Yeah, I mean, among other things, yes, but so I just, I will certainly preface what what I say before we really get into it.
Thank you for prefacing that, because it's well, here's what I think, and here's why I think this is a great topic. Not a lot of people know about it, and thus it's not like the most hidden topic in the world, but I think there's a blindness towards anything that has to do with something that mentions the word Nazi. Okay, there's the Band-Aid. We ripped it off. Guys, we are talking about a little operation known as Operation Paperclip that took place towards the end and especially after World War II. The reason why I said blindness is it's a word that is associated with a lot of horrible things, and for great reason. However, because we like to spend so much time away from it and shove it away, we do sometimes miss out on very momentous events like Operation Paperclip that kind of just got, I don't want to say necessarily swept under the rug. I don't think it was a nefarious cover-up or anything like that, because it's public knowledge. It's just, it was sort of shooed away and kind of tucked into a box and kind of forgotten about. And I think, look, if like it was such a big topic and, like an enemy force that we overthrew, I think it bodes, well, not bodes, but I think it's important that we discuss, hey, if all of those guys were doing all of that stuff, they didn't just disappear, they went somewhere. And I don't think a lot of people know that a lot of them, almost 2,000, came to the United States, not as prisoners necessarily, kind of. They were in a bind of sorts, but they came here as our foremost researchers, going into the Cold War, going into the space race, commercial airlines, commercial utility, tons of stuff, nuclear research, especially, and I mentioned rockets. So if you have no idea what we're talking about, we're about to educate you a little bit. More so, put some stuff on your plate. We can't educate you at all, probably, but put some stuff on your plate for you to chew on. And that is Operation Paperclip. Austin, in so many words, do you want to is it even possible to make a summary statement on what this operation even was?
Well, I would say, obviously, the operation in itself, we'll talk about it more and more and more, but I feel like we should also talk about, before, as we lead up to Operation Paperclip, obviously, you hit it on the head. Nazi Germany, going into the 30s, 40s, they like, and this is what I was saying about the whole vacuum thing, right? If you take everything that occurred, and obviously, one, this is my preface, in no capacity, it feels silly that we have to say this, but in today's times, you never know.
Yeah.
But today's, in this capacity that we're going to talk about this stuff, in no way, shape, or form are we any type of Nazi enthusiasts, sympathizers, supporters, nothing. None of that. Those guys were fucking
they
assholes.
They wouldn't have let us be in the club.
No,
anyway.
yeah, we would have been, you know, on the butt end of things too.
Maybe they would have made a tenuous alliance with us for us to take the Pacific, but other than that, they would not have. They would not have let us in the circle.
Right, exactly. So, you know, it feels silly saying that, but I think it's important to say those guys are fucking assholes.
Right.
Fuck them.
Of course.
But they also kind of contributed a lot to the forward movement in a lot of like Connor was saying, rockets, vaccines, the medical industry.
Yeah,
I mean,
oh my gosh,
a lot of stuff that they brought to the table. So yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we like to do here, our new mantra with Dweeb Dive is really get the wheels, you know, turning, you know, just get information out there to make you think about it. We're not trying to say this is what it was, this is how it is, this is it. It's just like, hey, have you heard about this? Hey,
yeah.
If you haven't, take a listen, and
we're just dangling a piece of candy and like, check this out.
Right, exactly. Rabbit holes. We're all about rabbit holes.
That's right.
So that's the biggest thing.
We're all about rabbit holing.
Okay.
I have the mind of a child. I'm the perfect candidate to be discussing a secret operation in World War II.
Exactly. Yeah. But yeah, like I was saying, I think the biggest thing is to kind of preface that, because I like to think that everyone that I'm associated with has this incredible, unique knowledge about World War II. Mm-hmm. But obviously people don't, because they're not freaks like me. I've always been like a huge
2 a.m. on the History Channel
guy.
Type documentaries. That's the sort of stuff
I mean, like,
where we pick this up.
Reading books that no one else would, you know, would do. So when we talk about Operation Paperclip and bringing almost 2,000 Nazis, I mean, and when we say Nazis, it's not just like, oh, they were in Germany, they were forced to work. No, I'm talking about like
some of them, they did determinations, and we'll get into this later probably. They did determinations, and they had panels where they found out that some of them were coerced, but as you were about to say, not all of them.
No.
Some of those boys were straight up in there. A lot of the inner circle type guys.
A lot of the big dogs that we brought over were like
Hans,
like big Heil guys, like huge Heil, like SS Heil guys,
routinely shaking hands with Goebbels, with the big man himself, like all of those guys,
Himmler, all those guys, big
timers.
But I just, you know, again, so it's like, well, why did we even want to do this type of thing? Well, so you track all the way back to not necessarily the start of World War II, but Germany in itself, as, you know, post World War I, going into the 30s. Obviously, the biggest thing was like all of Europe, really the whole world blamed Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, like all the Axis, I don't know what they were called in World War I, Axis powers. They said, you know, the world got ruined because you guys, you're paying for every single thing. You're not allowed to have anything, and fuck you guys, basically, is what happened. And Germany plunged into like the awful economic recession. I mean, it was really, really tough on them. I mean, yeah, they were culprits of World War I. I mean, it was kind of just like a weird thing. But anyway, so that's like the setting of Germany post World War I, and that basically them being kicked while they're down over and over and over and over and over again is what I think personally allows for the rise for someone cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs like Hitler to come to power, because he's like, hey, enough of this. Let's be
the financial status of your country. That will make a zealot out of almost anybody, I think. Yeah. So I think that is the predominant theory for that reason. You're taking, forgive my Gen Z lingo here, but you're taking L's back to back to back. You just lost a war. Your people are burning money for warmth in the streets. There's that famous photograph of kids literally playing like basically Legos with stacks of basically defunct money. Of course people are going to radicalize and become as you said, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs if the right person at the right time is slinging the right message, man. Like, it's who can say like what the actual atmosphere was mentally at that time, but from a 4,000 foot perspective, I mean, it definitely seems like living in a financially ruined country, you're kind of desperate. That's sort of the psychosphere, is desperation.
Right, exactly. And
it
again, that's why I say, like, if you look at it from in a vacuum, essentially, you kind of understand how all this stuff just kind of fell into place.
Yeah.
And obviously the world was still reeling from World War I in itself. You know, obviously the Great Depression was occurring in the United States. I think France was still hurting really badly. I think Britain was still hurting. I mean, like, the whole world, nothing had obviously happened to the scale it was and the involvement. So everyone was still reeling. So then Germany starts revving up again, and everyone's just kind of like, I don't know. That's not cool. But no one did anything about it because they were too afraid.
The opinions were kind of varied, though. I mean, a lot of the world was eager to see Germany come back on good footing. I mean, there was a lot of... the ethnic reality is there was tons of Germans all across the Western world, including the U.S., which is why someone like in the post-war Germany could rise to the level of the Time Person of the Year. I mean, that was Hitler's first big wash onto the global scene. He was on the cover of Time magazine. So there were a lot of people that were, of course, wary. A lot of the old war dogs who had just fought this war were super wary of Germany. But in terms of populaces and people, like, they had family over there. They had lines tracing back to Germany, and like, they didn't want... I mean, Germany's at the center of Europe almost. So nobody really wanted that to be this sort of completely run down. I mean, they were a center of commerce. They had tons of industry. And I don't think the people at large, the masses, really wanted them to stay underfoot for that long. Certainly military leaders did, and tacticians and people looking behind the veil a little bit. I don't think they were very happy about it. But I would say, just as a little aside, I think the people, the hearts of the people, I think they wanted Germany to kind of get back on its feet. Of course, not in the way that they did.
Right.
Not at all.
And I would piggyback off that and say, while the populaces and like the general public and all of that you just said were excited about kind of the rebirth of Germany post World War I think world leaders, especially, because while the civilian sector in Germany was on the rise, the military sector was as well, and Germany had very strict restrictions on the ability to have a military after World War I. It was in the Treaty of Versailles. They were really not supposed to be mobilizing any type of military, and they didn't care. They were just doing it. So I think that was maybe not a public eye thing. Obviously you wouldn't want that, but it was well known and documented that world leaders knew what Germany was doing, remobilizing. And again, people were just like, yeah, what are you doing there, Germany? And they're like, oh, nothing. We're just
look the other way. Nothing's to see here.
Exactly. And so you probably asking yourself, well, why are we going back this far and talking about the rise of Germany this way when we're talking about post-World War II Operation Paperclip? Well, I think it's important to say these types of things. Like, you set the stage because the type of innovation, the type of progress, like, you have to have like these certain foundations, I guess you could say. Like, it has to, basically everything has to be really nice in some way, shape, or form, where the mines are not needed to basically provide basic needs. It's like, oh, we're good on this front, we're good on a lot of fronts. Like, we can shift our focus to other types of things within the scientific, whether it's medical, technology, all type of different things. And obviously you can see that in the types of weaponry and all different types of things in Germany during World War II. Obviously, when the war did finally break out, which we'll probably talk about in another podcast, but essentially it's important, in my opinion, to set the stage as like, Germany was kind of like the perfect hive of activity to promote the type of
the context,
stomping on the gas pedal for research and all these things. Now, I say that, but obviously not only did they like accelerate with all that stuff, they also blew by all the ethical and moral things, which it's kind of like a catch-22, right? Like, obviously research is very slow. You want to be safe. You want to protect the core of humanity, humans. You know, we want to make sure that we're doing right by ourselves and just being obviously, you know, good, decent humans to each other. Obviously, Germany didn't give a shit about that. And that's, again, why I will continue to emphasize, like, we're not, sympathizing. We're not promoting. We're not saying like, hey, this is cool. It's literally, it's just the reality of it. Like, when you take away all of the restrictions and you take away all like the morals and ethics and you just say like, fuck it, go. I mean, stuff really and truly flies, which is, again, in a vacuum, overlooking it, kind of cool, like the tech, obviously, but obviously in the medical side of things and other natures where it relates to humans, awful, completely awful, terrible. But we'll talk about it as we talk more about the operation itself and what, the type of people that came over. But like, a lot of really, 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 really bad stuff happened to a lot of good people that ended up shaping and progressing like modern stuff today, which is
society, again, is a word that's thrown around a lot, but this is actually a case where it kind of did model society. It shaped it quite a bit, and the legacy of these advancements all around us. So
you don't really talk about it, and like the pretexts of it, or like the origin stories of it, they're not secrets. If you take the time to kind of just even do like a little bit of looking, you'll be like, oh wow, that's pretty fucked. Like, it's pretty fucked up. But
yeah, and these people were public figures too. Maybe not at first. There was a worry of witness protection, but like, just as a primer, like, these people were integrated into their communities. They were not smuggled under false pretenses either. For the most part, maybe there might have been a couple of exceptions if I remember correctly, but for the most part, they're like, hey, this is your new neighbor. He's going to be working on rockets at NASA. Also, he was a Nazi. Nice to meet you. Like, that's it, dude. Like, that's pretty much how they did it.
It was like, he's a Nazi, but he was screened. He was screened.
Yeah, and he's really smart, so we got
screened. Screened. So
he attended a mandatory recounseling.
Right, exactly.
I am sorry. I'll never do it again. Let me build rockets.
It's just this weird complex of when you have certain, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess motivators, like the motivator being literally, as World War II was winding down in Europe, the Cold War was essentially ramping up. Yeah. Like, obviously the Allied powers knew that Russia was like teetering.
It was the gallows hanging like in the corner, just looming over them. Like,
right.
I would even say there was a lot of leaders that knew that they were going to be the next problem. Patton was hugely vocal his entire career. Patton, of course, being one of the major generals that came up the Africa campaign up through Italy and into Germany. Even when, I think during his Africa campaign, he was quoted as saying, like, I think he used one of the many Russian slurs at the time. And he said, they're no friend of mine. He literally said, they're no friend of mine, because he saw it coming from like a mile away, and everybody eventually followed suit. But to some, We have an economically ravaged populace, Germany. We have a enigmatic, charismatic, pretty zealous guy rising up through the political ranks, garnering a lot of support, getting industry going, and asking people to cross lines for the sake of research, development, and for creating a military again, which, as you said, was not allowed. That just goes to show you how amazing laws are at keeping horrible people at bay. So you've got all this going on. World War II's heating up. Tensions rise. The Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated. The war gets launched. And suddenly, you have not just this inner, more zealous core of Germans that, eventually became the Nazi Party, but you also have the whole of Germany now supporting the war effort, seeing themselves as, they've got a score to settle. The world's got it wrong. Germany's not, down and out. We're actually the predominant power in Europe and maybe the Western world and blah, blah, blah. We know the rest of the story. What did you find interesting about sort of the origins of Operation Paperclip and sort of like the little details sort of propping up, as we've already discussed, throughout the war? Because for me, like Patton kind of seeing the Russian angle, and then the creation of the T-Force, which I can expand upon later, but basically people looking to exploit enemy intelligence, looking to recover. You may have heard of the Monument Men, who recovered art and fabrics and like priceless things of history in, during the course of the war, so they didn't get destroyed. That was one side of it. The other side of it was the T-Force, who was basically preserving technology, schematics for bombs, schematics for jet fighters, and taking them back to the U.S. We put them all on, a boat and shipped them back. So to me, that's where, the Monument Men and the T-Force and that kind of thing, that's what got my my notice initially. But how about you?
I mean, I just think that it's so interesting, and it's just something you never hear about. How essentially, like, you look at Nazi Germany and you say, like, wow, they were really technologically advanced. Mm-hmm. As far as you look at, like, the V2 rocket, the V1 rocket, the Me-262, which is the first ever jet fighter that they created. Just like all these different things. And then, maybe like, I don't know, 5 years later, like that stuff starts popping up across the world. And it's like, I wonder if they ever thought about, did they steal? Surely they like stole schematics and then our own people were working on it or something. But no, I mean, it literally, we just stole the people. we took them and said, like, hey,
same work, different office.
Yeah. Hey, we'll make some concessions for you. And we want you to come and work for us instead of the Russians, because we're afraid of what the Russians will do with this type of thing. And we'll use it for good, which obviously, in some capacity, I suppose, depending on how deeply you drill into it, that would go. But, I wanted to, a fun fact about Patton, since we're talking about the man.
Yeah.
He also believed that he was a reincarnated Roman legionnaire, which
straight up.
Sure you knew, but people probably didn't know that. So when he was in North Africa, he'd be like, yes, I remember this battle very vividly as a Roman legionnaire. So that's kind of a cool thing.
The Roman legionnaires facing Hannibal Barca in Carthage. That was a tough one.
Yeah,
that was a real tough battle. I don't know if he would be remembering it so fondly if he truly was a reincarnate. I think he'd have a little bit of shell shock, as it were.
Roman Empire podcast episode
coming soon. That's all men think about. You ladies, you were right. You were right.
That's right. How often do you think about it? Well, obviously, we're thinking about it right now. We're not. It wasn't brought up until I brought it up because I was thinking about it. But. And then just to like continually set the stage here too, right? So I actually learned about this yesterday. I don't think it reached its full operational capacity, but with this one in mind, I can't help but wonder if there were others that did reach full capacity. And what I'm alluding to is this facility called Prorora. I have it pulled up next to me.
Yeah.
I was watching this show yesterday, and basically it's like a 2-mile long building on the Baltic coast, meant for German citizens, like industrial citizens, workers, like those type, like just normal everyday people. And they go to this, I hate to say resort, but I mean, it's on the Baltic Sea. It's like, you know, it's nice. They're from industrial cities, so they probably never had this type of thing. They just put all these people in there, and then they just fill their day with activities like rallies. I mean, they just like schedule their day, and it's like scheduled basically brainwashing to allude to, you know, being very proud, like basically a huge nationalistic factory for people. Like you go there, you're like, oh, this is really nice, and then you go through your day, and then you're like, oh wow, this, you know, and now I'm on board with all this stuff no matter what. So I just think like when we talk about the lengths that Germany went to create like this foundational level for the top minds to like accelerate everything that they were working on. I'm talking about like they literally thought of probably everything. Like not only were they like bringing themselves up from this depression post World War I, but they were literally had like Prorora. Like I said, this one I think wasn't technically all the way operational, but it makes me think like, well, maybe there were other ones like where they literally just send tens of thousands of citizens to these places and say like, hey, check this nice place out. Oh, it's like a scheduled vacation thing. We're going to just, you know, schedule your day for you. And people are like, oh, okay. And then they learn about what's going on in the country. That's very one-sided,
and they're insulated at this place, so there's no cross-referencing with other people in town. They're literally just there.
Yeah, and I mean, there's tens of thousands of people there, so it's like it's not like it's a little thing. So I just really want to like emphasize how hard Germany worked to get the foundational level for the top minds to literally only focus on like research and all this other like tech stuff and all these types of things. Because I think to that extent, you know, it's honestly, it's kind of incredible that this happened. And I say that because like, we're talking about like 2,000 close to 2,000 scientists that the United States and United Kingdom pulled out of Germany. Russia also got their hands on a lot of top German people too. It's like, you know, we think about like innovation, inventors, like, you know, I feel like there's tons obviously helping push society forward at all times. But then you hit like, mainly it's like, I feel like one-offs, you know, like one real big jump, like one or two people that really like accelerate, you know, push move the bar forward. And we're talking about like, it's thousands of them. And I feel like that's just so unheard of, that the level of intellect and basically consolidated in one country, like that they produced all these different things. Like we'll talk about the vaccine program in the United States. We'll talk about NASA. We'll talk about, you know, rockets, jets, all these things that pushed the world forward, especially on like a technological scale. It came from one place. It really did. You know, not to take away from all the inventors and innovators afterward, but like literally from one place. And then not to mention like big time names, like obviously Einstein fled Nazi Germany, came to the United States. And the same thing with Oppenheimer. Same thing. Yep. Came from Germany, from Nazi Germany, fled. He's like, I don't like what's going on here. He came to the United States. Guess what he did? There's a movie on it. You know, he helped end World War II in Japan.
He made the first Barbie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's that type of capitalism and, you know, commercialism created Barbie, and Japan's like, wow, that's pretty cool. Let's chill. So
thanks, Oppenheimer. Thanks, Doc.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, don't forget the highway system.
Yeah.
The actual highway system, that is a German export. Eisenhower
Yes, it
saw that
is.
and he was like, yo, I want to be able to land some Boeings on any road in
Yeah.
America if I need to.
Yep.
There you go.
I mean, I just think it's like so incredible the level of innovation that just came from one place, like one singular place. Like
It was a hotbed.
we pulled so much stuff out of it, and that's why I think it's important to lay that groundwork beforehand, because it's like, well, how come we can't do that, or like how come we haven't done that type of thing. It's like, well, when you literally like get everybody on the same page, whether it's good or not, which is the kicker. The moral and ethical standing of just being a good human. I mean, when everyone's kind of on the same page, whether they're on that or they're on the other side of it, like that's the type of thing that it takes, which, you know, ironically enough, when you see like, you know, futuristic movies or games or whatever, it's like, oh, the whole world united around one, you know, common enemy or cause or whatever, and suddenly our innovation exploded because we're all on the same page. Like, you know, I hate the context in which I explain
tough.
it, or
It's
I guess
tough to
like the
talk
example, but yeah, it's like literally like they figured it out and they did it. They executed it in not like a utopia, but like a very perverted utopia that
For
allowed
some,
them to do this kind of thing.
And for
Yeah.
for a small time, and for some people, yeah, I would agree. I would agree that they were. I mean, I think part of the fascist doctrine is to create a utopia for whatever the primary class of people is. I think that was one of their objectives. So we have a hotbed of innovation fueled by equal parts zealotry, equal parts Germany needs a bounce back, a little bit of nationalistic pride. We have a war ensuing from tensions boiling over, starting with the German occupation, outside their borders, into Poland and all that. We have this war that begins. The Americans get involved. As we start making our way into the heart of Europe, we begin capturing our first real looks, along with previously captured British intelligence. But the Americans are getting their first real looks at what the hell are these German guys carrying around. We look at their Sturmgewehrs, weapon systems that would eventually go on to inspire. Well, Kalashnikov was already previously inspired to make the AK rifle platform, but Eugene Stoner, who ended up making the AR-15, and even Browning, who would later in life admit that he was inspired by German designs. All of these guys, we start uncovering like a kind of an insane standard of weaponry. Weapons that were purpose-built, they were durable, blah, 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 mass-produced, but also like kind of delicate. Whether that's the MG32 or, again, the Sturmgewehr or the Kar 98 even had a certain elegance to them that just wasn't really seen on any other faction out there. Not the Americans, definitely not the British, and not the Soviets either. So we start getting like little tastes, little tinkers, and then we start recovering tank bodies, and we start uncovering like, wow, these guys are using electrical systems in addition to manually cranked systems, in addition to like pressure systems. Like they had working EVs, working electric vehicles. They had really delicate electronics guiding some of their tanks and some of their vehicles and systems. And it's just like this mounting curve of like, okay. Like every time we push the line, every time we capture and get things intact that weren't scuttled, we start uncovering more and more, especially as we get more towards the interior of Germany and towards that. We start uncovering, evidence of schematics, and then we start seeing actual bodies and shells of like the VHS-2 or the V2 rocket, which, if you didn't know, is the first liquid propellant guided rocket system to ever exist. That laid the foundation for the Tomahawk missile, which was the U.S.'s most ubiquitous missile system forever. That's the most duty-tested. It's one of the most duty-tested weapons we've ever used. So and then you I think you mentioned the ME jets. Yeah, we start uncovering jets. We start uncovering different types of ordnance that they were dropping on us, or they were about to drop on us. A lot of this stuff didn't see the light of day. Whether it was some of these experimental bombs and ordnance, and then they had the city killer howitzer. It wasn't called howitzer, but it was a giant railroad operated artillery. Have you seen that? Where it's like the size, it's the size of a skyscraper. A lot of these toys that they had that they didn't necessarily deploy, and we begin to start a counter, or we ramp up our counterintelligence operations. Like I mentioned, the T-Force comes in. They start guaranteeing the capture and dismantling and analysis of all of these weapons. And we start getting pretty skeeved out. We start not only fearing what the Germans could have been, but where some of the stuff might go. And a lot of people successfully concluded that, hey, I think the Russians might want to get their hands on this. They certainly have a big, big piece of the spoils here because, I don't know if they offered, I forget what the body count totals were, but if they didn't offer the most bodies for the cause, they certainly were up there. And I think, say what you want. Say what you want about clandestine operations. Say what you want about the course of the war in general and how the prides of two nations like the U.S. and Russia kind of spun into what became the Cold War. Say what you want about that, but geez, I don't know, dude. I get... My mind's kind of blown sitting here thinking about the forethought it would have taken to begin capturing these things while we still have like a logistically challenging war going on. A super costly war, not just in time and material, but, human bodies, the human cost of it too. While this is all going on, it's like the Battle of the Bulge is happening. Some of the bloodiest conflicts of the war have yet to be seen, not to mention the other theater. And we're doing this. Somebody, the Joint Chiefs of Staff who established the T-Force and eventually established a bunch of subcommittees that eventually established all these operations, including Paperclip. Like, dang, dude, like these guys had the forethought and the idea to like begin a counterintelligence operation against the foe that had not really technically reared its head yet. Like, to me, I don't know, it just blows my mind. And like, there you go, there's Paperclip.
Excuse me. Yeah, again, like you said, the type of tech that Germany was producing, and I think if you do any type of, excuse me, research, or just like you show a little more general interest in World War II, you come to find that a lot of people said if Germany had one extra year, a lot of stuff could have looked a lot differently. And while obviously Hitler kind of unified Germany and pushed them forward, a lot of people say if he was not in command towards the end, Germany probably would have had a different outcome as well, because he was obviously obsessive about different things. And like, as soon as Germany started to lose, and it was evident that they were probably going to lose, he started making people prioritize into different techs versus some of the ones they were developing that may have actually swung the world if they were ever introduced to the world stage. My one thought, I don't know what the counter tech would have been towards, what German military officials wanted to do, but you point out, like in the Battle of the Bulge, some of the tanks, like obviously the Tiger tank is a prominent thing during the Battle of the Bulge.
What a piece of machinery.
Hitler basically told the military to focus on King Tiger tanks, which are even scarier than normal Tiger tanks.
Bigger, better,
Basically, focus all your resources on this, while on the flip side there, German officials are saying, like, I think we need to, focus in other areas to... It
was base logistics at that point.
To aim for the long run, but he... So I say that in that essence, like, a lot of this stuff could have come out and flipped what we know in this world, which is just really kind of scary to think about, right? Like, but again, it's just... the credit of how accelerated this country was with their intellect. Like within, I'm sure they started working on stuff a lot earlier. So say we'll give it like 10 years time, right? Like 1935 to 45. Like that, in my mind, is a very short amount of time to go from all manual machinery during war, prop planes, no rocket tech. Like you go from, you went from basically like really, shitty tanks, essentially, shitty weaponry.
Tanks were a huge problem. I mean, they were like a giant force multiplier eventually, but people often forget the first wave of tanks, pretty much across the board, deemed like unsuccessful. Besides for a couple applications which we focused on after that, but for what they wanted to be at the beginning, they were not the fearsome force multiplier that they are now. They were not like a main implement. They were like kind of like a sideshow. They were kind of goofy.
Yeah, exactly. And I think again, it's just incredible in my mind when you look at it in a vacuum and you say like where you look at where the world was before and then you look at what came out of it. I am not surprised that the United States military, along with probably the UK, the Allies, everybody they're getting hammered by this tech, and just by obviously sheer will, determination, tactics, all those types of things, that the Allies began flipping the script and winning. Yeah. Of course, it's not surprising that they're like, let's kind of look at this stuff here because, if it wasn't for that type of stuff, obviously like I hate to say like the American spirit, but I mean, really just like, if you look like tech to tech, I would say Germany's tech was way better. The United States just, I don't know what it was. They had the X factor and they won. But
personnel, the X factor for us was we're fresh. We're not war torn. We're not kind of harrowed like a lot of the other European militaries were at that point. We're a fresh face. We're enthusiastic. And like, just so we're clear, every other nation in this conflict had a propaganda machine going. Like we certainly did. Ours was very effective. We had a lot of young dudes coming into this war like ready to go, hyped up and ready to join the conflict. But like we just had a personnel advantage that Germany didn't have. I mean, it's as easy as their landmass and the fact that their population was just more constricted and they didn't have as many fresh, like young military-age men ready to go. And as you said, it's Hitler spent too long in development. I mean, he harped on sort of these more outlandish things. And like, again, let's be clear, Hitler was on meth. The late stage German war machine was weird, dude. Hitler was 3-4 doses a day. Like as early as the Olympics, he was already hitting the meth pipe quite often. He was tweaking like in a lot of his private moments. And if there is footage, this is not like a secret of like, oh, his secretary was like, oh yes, and Mr. Hitler would go into his back room. No, he would do it openly. He's tweaking fidget. So like all this to say, the man became like, if you thought he was deranged at the beginning, he became even more deranged at the end. And that affected his acumen for military strategy. It really did. There's a story about him ordering generals to bring in reserve forces that did not exist. And he kept, like, day after day, he'd be like, why aren't we mobilizing this force or this force? And he's this huge figure that everybody's afraid of. And like, imagine these big, like, storied generals that like survived the First World War. And they're like, these like really important guys are just sitting there like shaking in their britches, being like, I don't know how to tell this guy that he's talking about forces that do not exist and only exist in his mind. Stuff like that. So it's like the way you were describing it reminded me of like a game of like Sid Meier's Civilization. Like if you spend too much time in like the development phase, you don't expand your borders, you don't establish beachheads, like, yeah, you'll get crushed from all sides. And that's kind of like, to make the most simplistic, reductive version of this story, like that's kind of what was going on in the late stage war for Germany. Yeah, and then they start getting crushed. Every side of the Axis power begins to be folded in. The Russians from their theater, us for the European and African theaters up through Italy, and sort of from all sides, they get crushed. And suddenly we have the post-war state. We have the spoils of victory, and we have a huge mess in Europe to clean up. And I think this is probably where Operation Paperclip really hits its stride. It was active before that, but really was concerned with recovery and not even that much analysis, mainly just recovery. But now we have, knowing that we have all of these weapons that we've just discovered, that we keep on discovering, we have all these questions basically from a tactical standpoint that we need answered, not just for like, you know, what are the Russians going to do with it, but in general. I mean, as you said, this was sort of the second renaissance in terms of like industry and advances in science and bio and tech. And like, there's a very real, just natural urge, I think, from the entire world of like, we got to uncover these secrets. We got to understand it. We want this brain trust. We want this talent in our corner, in our pen. And I think those are the pretty much the main two factors behind an operation like Paperclip. And it's kind of like, okay, we have all these scientists, we have all these engineers, we have all of these, you know, as warped as they are, we have all these great minds. What the hell are we going to do with them? And that kind of brings us to the meat of this operation.
Yeah, and I would like to just point out that there is a book by one Annie Jacobson that it's titled Operation Paperclip, The Secret Intelligence Program to Bring Nazi Scientists to America.
Yeah.
I have not read it. I am, you know, disappointed to say, but
me neither.
That is one of the biggest, obviously it's a very credible, readable source that details this entire operation and what it was. And I think she was on Joe Rogan as well. So, you know, certainly something to look up, check out, read, all those things. You
couldn't go one podcast without mentioning our rival, dude.
Oh my gosh, yeah. You mean the inspiration? Rival. The inspiration
for you, maybe, dude.
Right, exactly.
I'm here to take him down.
But yeah, this is where we get into like the post World War state. You know, I think is before that. As soon as everybody knew that it was just a matter of time for Germany, that was when it was like, okay, we need to start thinking about how we're going to get these mines under our control versus Russia doing the same thing. That's where you get like the split in the country of Germany, obviously the Berlin Wall, Eastern Bloc, all that stuff. But that's when the grab starts occurring. And this is where we start, you know, kind of seeing certain names in particular come to the forefront of Operation Paperclip and you know, who was being targeted, what they were going to be doing. And, you know, that this is where earlier alluded to the whole, it's almost like a pick your poison kind of scenario. It's like, well, do we take this person in knowing that they were like Nazis and really bad? Do we take them in anyway and kind of let them help us? Or do we say, fuck them, but then Russia gets a hold of them and then like makes them do really awful stuff? So it's like, you know, the lesser of two evils, I suppose. And this is, you know, the whole, oh yeah, they were screened. Like, yeah, barely. Some of them were really, really bad that we're about to talk about. At least one guy in particular was really, really bad. And, you know, he was cool until people found out, like, hey, wait a minute, this guy actually like really sucks ass. Like, he is a monster. Why did we let this happen? And the U.S. was like, oh yeah, yeah, he's kicked out of this place now.
Anyway, here's our new rocket designs that's going to enable us to reach the moon.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Tomato.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah. Look away from this really gross mess, but look at this really cool new shiny thing that we've got, America.
Look at this rocket.
Right?
Gosh dang. Yeah. It's so nuts. But like, I guess I hadn't really thought of it in the way you just posed it, which was, yeah, okay, a moral rejection, a total moral rejection of them, including like not choosing to utilize any of their work or like continue any of their research. Sure. But is that a willful surrender of like very volatile information to what is seeming to be at the time our most direct enemy in Russia?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, like, I think that's true. And I think that's probably one of the bigger reasons why we did this, why a recovery and intelligence exploitation mission became a smuggling operation. Not even smuggling. It wasn't secret. An operation to get these scientists over to Florida and Texas and Kansas. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like a snatch and grab, really.
It is a snatch and grab.
Was.
And it's like, yes, that reasoning of keeping things out of Russia's hands, absolutely. I think that was a big driving force, and I think that's what really sold it to most people. But let's not pretend like there wasn't a visceral excitement to get our hands on like the best of the best of the best. I definitely think that was part of it too. I think there was some pretty, some pretty thirsty warhounds within our own government that were looking to get the upper hand on whatever conflict was next. I can't necessarily blame them either.
Yeah, and I think it's like the human complex, I guess. I think we talked about it a little bit during the social media podcast, and I think we'll continually talk about it in other aspects. But basically, like, I think everyone is a little bit selfish or in the term of, we need to be protecting ourselves, and you can convert that into nationalism or national pride or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, like, I think the lines get very blurred, especially when there's a very easily motivating factor, I say, with Russia. And then you just be like, oh, well, I mean, Russia would have done worse things. We did better with the bad guys than what they probably would have done, which, I guess in essence, like you think about some of the programs that we're going to talk about, a couple of them in particular, where I guess it's like, would you have rather not had this at all or had it take even longer? Or would you just kind of like swallow and like kind of like, push the bad aside and be like, well, we'll ignore that and we'll just kind of like, like an Etch-a-Sketch, like, okay, we're all good now. Like, it's good. We'll just move forward with this. I think it's just kind of like the moral dilemma, I guess, which I personally, I think, like, obviously it happened a long time ago, and I'm not going to be like, oh, well, fuck NASA, knowing that a lead Nazi scientist helped develop that program. I'm not going to be like, yeah, fuck that, or anything else that they were involved in, but I think it's just like interesting to think about and to like I said, you kind of find your own rabbit hole. You kind of get the wheels turning. Like, if you didn't know about it, we're going to talk about some, and with some certain, names and people, but obviously there's almost 2,000 that came over, and there's not, just the guys that we're going to talk about. There's probably many, many more that we won't mention. And, certainly I probably should pick up the book that I mentioned earlier. Again, that book being Operation Paperclip, The Secret Intelligence Program to Bring Nazi Scientists to America by Annie Jacobsen. might be something worthwhile for me because I'm interested in this stuff anyway. But it talks about a lot of other stuff. So without, I guess, further ado, we've alluded to it a lot. We've certainly talked about all these programs.
We've done our due diligence. I think we're good now.
We've set the stage,
yes.
right? We set the stage, and we kind of highlighted the importance of, hey, why do we want to do this? And obviously, I think a lot of it is, when we talk about it, you could turn it into NASA, which is like cool, or you could turn it into probably like just incredible ballistic missile development that could have ended the world. I don't know. But do you want to bring a name up first? Do you want me to? What?
I more so have a general knowledge of the storyline and how the operation shaped up, and including, once they got back and they got integrated in Florida and Texas and some other states towards the interior of the country. That's more so my knowledge of it. But yeah, as I understand, you've got some particular names. I'll just say before Austin starts going ham on these names, after a short stint at the aforementioned screening centers all around Europe, as the post-war trials were getting started quietly in back rooms and sort of hush-hush meetings, the scientists and engineers and otherwise, contributors to the scientific and war research efforts are quietly being led away from these trials. They're being pardoned behind closed doors, or mostly closed doors, I'll say. They're being screened for a pretty short time in a couple processing centers around Europe, and just like that, they are on planes and boats over to America. It's not long until they are given residential homes. Again, they're not being kept in bunkers. Some may have had extended stays on military bases, but they're not being kept 4,000 feet underground. A lot of them are being put up in residences, in communities, not even on base residences either. Some of them are straight up going right next to the Smiths down the street. So, and again, just so we're not having any mental blindness here, Nazi scientists a couple weeks ago are now getting a white picket fence, Scruffy the dog, a 2-car garage, and they're driving to work for the Americans. Just like that. That was a reductive overview of the actual travel process, but for a lot of these guys, it was a matter of weeks and months before they were working in a new office on the same stuff. Now, like you said, a lot of that would eventually mature into work for NASA, work for our highway system, work for consumer goods and consumer technologies. But in the beginning, it was basically a brain drain. Give us all you know, and also let's start making some progress on the things you were working on. But who of these names do you want to talk about first? I'd mentioned Hans already because he was one of the big ones, but who's got your eye?
So I mean, I've got a couple here, but let's talk about. We mentioned NASA a lot.
Yeah,
right?
That's probably the biggest one.
Let's talk about that guy, Werner von Braun.
Yeah,
he is really. I don't want to say he was like the head of NASA, but he was credited with basically helping develop like the Apollo missions, getting the United States to the moon, really innovating the rocket development for NASA in this country. And, so he was a Nazi scientist, and he was also a member of the SS. He was really big. I think he's the key figure in the, looking at something here because I can't remember all this stuff. He developed the V2 rocket program, which is what you alluded to already. And basically, with that understanding of rocket technology, and I think you mentioned like the first liquid propelled, like probably like jet fuel, because that didn't exist yet. So
right. That's like where that comes from, is this dude. Yeah.
So like his knowledge and understanding of the propulsion ability of liquid fuel is probably what helped propel the NASA space program into space during the space race. So, like I said, not talking about, guys that were like, if you don't help us, we'll kill you. It was like Nazi guys. Like, he was in the SS, which is the really bad, the really bad one.
Yeah.
And he recruited prisoners from concentration camps to work at, labor camps for this here says more than 20,000 people died in the labor camp that he was overseeing to help develop. So so that's like the flip. That's the one side, right? Nazi Germany side. He's an SS guy. He doesn't give a shit about human life. He cares about rocket tech. That's all he cares about. He cares about propelling this particular technology to the forefront of Germany and to help it do whatever. Probably all bad stuff, right? So now flip side, Germany's losing, the US is winning. Now the US recognizes this guy and says like, hey, wait a minute. He created this V2 program, which basically so there were two rockets that Germany developed, V1 and V2. V1 almost looked like little drones, right? So those were able to be shot down.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff was targeted at the UK to try and make them surrender before the United States got involved. So V1s were a big deal. And then the United Kingdom figured out how radar, how to detect them, how to shoot. They could be shot down in the air.
They weren't fast movers either.
Right. You could shoot them down. So Germany's like, okay, well, let's develop the V2. The V2 rocket is basically, it goes up, it comes down, you can't shoot it down. A lot of damage, a lot of destruction. So
what we all know as rockets today, what we associate as rockets, that is the DNA of that is the V2 rocket.
Yeah.
Like that liquid fuel is that is what that is. It came from the Germans.
Yeah, if you Google V2 rocket and you just watch a little video of one launching, you'll be like, oh, wait a minute, that's just a small rocket. That's literally just a small rocket.
That's the daddy-o. That's the big boy.
So
OG.
So that's this guy, right? So von Braun, Nazi, comes over, now is a lead scientist in the United States for NASA. And so this stuff, he was featured in a Disney TV special in 1955.
Yep.
Man and the Moon. He was on Time magazine. He inducted into the National Academy of Engineering and received the National Medal of Science in the United States. So
the highest award, one of those awards, I forget what it's called, but the highest award that NASA can offer anybody. He got 2 of those, I believe. or he personally got one and someone else on his team got another one who was also a colleague back in old Germany. So it's okay, to be perfectly clear, the Nuremberg trials were taking a long time, number one. And as much as we know about the war now and what was unfolding during those times, not everybody knew that. It certainly wasn't it wasn't professed loudly and proudly all the time that these horrible atrocities were happening. For one, again, the information hadn't really the full story and full picture hadn't come together for the general public yet. Number two, news media had an interest in keeping things positive at the time. Like I mentioned earlier, news media was a part of our personal propaganda over here, but in the post-war era, thank you college communications degree for this, by the way. News media was not the bare, all gory sort of news cycle that we're accustomed to now, which is biases towards, in my opinion, biases towards things that are, jaw-dropping and horrible. News media back then was really more concerned with everything's great, it's wonderful here, we're having a post-war boon, all that kind of stuff. So there wasn't a ton of publicly available resources for people to really digest and understand exactly how bad Nazi Germany was during the war. So, yes, were people sort of turning a blind eye to this guy and that's why he was on the Disney program? Absolutely. But also, not everybody exactly knew just how bad these guys were at the time. That information would leak out and sort of take form years and decades after the war. So that, just to put that out there, but sorry, continue.
Yeah, I think it's agreed. I think it was obviously the Nuremberg trials. I think the United States, and the Allies, I mean, I think all parties were, while they were trying to sift out the really, really awful people, if the really, really awful people happened to be a lead guy in their field, they were like, you know, you're going to go this way. We're going to try you in this room. And they're probably like, hey, look, you're scum, but we think we can make you less scummy. What do you say?
Yeah.
And they're just like, well, can my family come too? They're like, yeah. Shut up. Come on, let's go. Like, obviously, very layman's term way to direct. But I think that's really what happened. Like, not a lot of people know about this stuff. And, you know, I think, obviously, with the Cold War heightening and all the things that were brought to the table by these guys, it is hard to backtrack. And like I said earlier, I'm like, well, do I hate NASA now, knowing that, you know, we put people on the moon because of Nazis? Like, no, I don't hate NASA for that. Nor do I really like blame this country for basically utilizing the type of intellect that was available. But I think it's just interesting to think about. And I just think, like, you know, especially for me, when I think about World War II and the impact that it had on a global scale, this type of thing, like, I really didn't know about Operation Paperclip until probably like a couple months ago, honestly. Like, I think I saw
I didn't know it by name.
I looked into it.
I knew there was intelligence operations to recover German tech, and I knew that some of the scientists had made their way over here. I had never known how that happened, and I never knew it was just a direct one-to-one, like, you, and you, come on. And then let's get to work a couple months later. Like, I didn't know it was that casual. And, like, I certainly didn't know that these guys became, like, prominent fixtures in their communities, in the places in the labs they worked at. They were not under dog and guard all day. They were not working for, like, breadcrumbs in a corner and never were mentioned and never alluded to. No, they became leaders and, like, directors of huge programs.
Yeah.
That guy's name that you were just mentioning, his name was a huge scholarship you could get from NASA forever. They got rid of it not that long ago. So it's like, wow. Just one more balancing act here. I do want to point out that there were scientists in the American scientific community at the time that were not cool with this. There was a huge document. I'm blanking on the name of the document, but it was basically a decree that said, we don't want them here. We are morally objecting to them 100%. We do not want to work with them, blah, blah, blah. Among the signatures on that document, Albert Einstein was in favor of that document. So there was definitely huge pushback, but we proceeded anyway.
Yeah, and it's one of those hard moral lines, I guess. It's like, you know, okay, so we pull these guys out of Germany. We see if we can control their workspace, essentially, not their workspace, but like their field. Obviously, they're already kind of like experts in their field because of really shitty means in some instances, a lot of instances, really. Mm-hmm. But if we're kind of past this really like research R&D stage where obviously they crossed a lot of lines to get to the point they were at. So it's like, well, as the United States, can we control the narrative now and use them for good? Which, again, it's like this moral dilemma. But if you can control this type of person or field and use it for good, like, would you throw it away, or would you
well, not just throw it away, but willingly serve it up to your greatest threat at that time?
Well, I mean, even still, like, say, like, the United States, like, grab these people, just like, we don't want Russia to have them, and then
incarcerated them, yeah, I
and
suppose.
then, like, either incarcerated them or like prosecuted them or something like that. You know, there's all these different things that they could do with them, and you know, I think as you know, weird as it is to say, I think the United States made the right move on some of them. I think on some of them. I think, you know, I'll bring up another name that I think, like, maybe not that guy. Maybe you like.
I mean,
you have him like handcuffed, and then you like pick his brain a little bit, and then you're like, all right, fuck you, you're a piece of shit. We'll talk about him here in a second, but like I think in some instances, like this, like, you know, Von Braun, awful practices, but I think what was produced because of the good environment control, what have you, was okay. Like I'm looking at this, it's a CIA document that I'm looking at from, I think, the book, again, that I had mentioned previously.
Sure.
So Werner von Braun, during the Ford administration, was almost awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. It was this close, and then one of his advisors was like, yeah, that dude fucking sucks, he's a Nazi, so they didn't give it to him. So, I mean, like, that's the type of, like people were so willing that either didn't know or were willing to forget that.
They wanted it. They wanted it so bad. They wanted that nice turnaround story arc. But again, I don't think people had enough information at the time. The picture hadn't fully developed of just exactly what those guys were up to, especially an SS officer. Like, geez. So it's funny to see these attitudes of like, yes, this guy's working for us. He's turning it around. He's a fixture in our community. Thank goodness. And then, you know, the sobering reality check of like, yeah, we're having fun building rockets and advancing humanity and stuff, but this guy was complicit in one of the worst atrocities ever known. So it's like this weird, hazy mental jungle for these scientists. It had to have been like, I ask, how did they work with this guy? But I know how they did it. They were excited by the science. Like, that's always the answer. They were excited by the profitability, the advancements, what have you. They were like how distractible dogs are in a way, where they just get so focused on the work at hand. They get so focused on these incredible technological leaps they're making. Careers are being made of the scientists that are already working on these things. Like, they're seeing some of their greatest ideas come to fruition. So, like, yes, I get how it happened. For sure. It's human nature to be blind and to develop blindness for certain things. And I definitely think that's the case here. But what was the other name you were going to mention?
So there's another name that this is the one where I'm like, maybe we should have just like picked his brain and then, you know, locked him up or something. Is this the guy that got,
like, he was here for a while and then they were like, nope, and they re-housed him in like Argentina or one of those?
Well, they didn't re-house him. They just kicked his ass out. And then he went to Argentina.
No, one of them. Okay, yeah, I believe it. But one of them, we soft kicked him out. We kicked him out, but the Army Corps of Engineers built his house and like.
Yeah, so maybe we're taling about the same guy. Yeah, so I mean, I guess we didn't say like
built
fuck
his
off,
house and got him set up in whatever South American country he went to. I forget if it was Brazil or whatever, but
Argentina. Yeah,
it was Argentina. So.
Yep. So I'm talking about.
We kicked him out, but it wasn't. It was like a little. It wasn't that hard.
Right. It was very gentle.
Yeah.
So the name I'm talking about here his name's Walter Schreiber. He was like a medical officer in Germany, part of the Nazi Party. I don't want to mess up the titles, but he was like one of the guys, if not the guy, in Germany's vaccine research program.
Dang.
So, like, and this is why I say, like, this guy, I'm not so high on this guy as, you know, the NASA guy, right? Like, so as you can imagine.
Oh, I think I know where this is going. Sorry.
This medical officer, this doctor, essentially, with vaccines, I mean, it's like Germany was developing biological weapons. They were testing different things. They were trying different things. Right. So obviously, who do they test them on? This is where we get into the really awful area, right? And then Germany was like, well, we're making all these really awful things. Let's make sure that our guys can survive them. Mm-hmm. So what do you do? You test out vaccines, cures, whatever on human subjects, which is the big ethical moral line crossing, which is like completely fucked up. He's one of those guys. He's like one of the top guys that's like let's try this and this in this person that we gave this disease to and see what happens. Oh, they died? Okay, let's grab another one. Like, this is the type of, like, this is like the really fucked up one, right? Like, obviously the other guy also fucked up, grabbed people from concentration camps, and like I said, 20,000 died in his labor camps developing this stuff. But like, this is the type of thing, it's like knowingly going into it like, yeah, I'm probably gonna kill this person. I'm gonna kill hundreds of people, thousands of people. I'm doing it and I don't care. Like, this is the guy that did that in Germany. So I think the Russians get to him first, right? So they grab him, and then I think somehow he defects off. He comes to the United States and basically gets plugged into the vaccine program in Texas. And ironically enough, I didn't know this, he was stationed at Randolph Air Force Base in Texas. That's my dad worked there.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
My dad, when I lived in San Antonio, my dad worked at Randolph Air Force Base. He worked in the medical field in the Air Force, and then when he retired, he was instantly contracted for the Military Vaccine Agency by Lockheed Martin, and so he worked out of Randolph Air Force Base. Now, I'm not saying there's connections, I'm not saying there's connections, but I'm not.
A couple of the guys went to work for Lockheed. Like, that's just true. Like, a couple of them did.
I'm mainly saying like Randolph Air Force Base, Military Vaccine Agency. This is a vaccine guy. I'm not connecting the dots and saying that is absolutely, what it was, but I'm just saying like it's kind of quacking like a duck. It's kind of looking like a duck. I'm gonna call it a duck, but I don't know if it really is. Like, could be a goose. I don't know.
You're saying you're not. Just to be clear, you're saying we're not 100% sure if he directly contributed to what eventually came out of our vaccine program.
Oh no, he definitely contributed to that, without a doubt. He did. 100% did.
What are you wavering on then?
What I'm saying is like Randolph Air Force Base. My dad working for the Military Vaccine Agency, which was he worked in.
Oh, I
Randolph
missed that
Air
part.
Force Base.
Got you. I missed that part.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not saying any of that. Like that continuing. Like, I don't know. I don't know enough about it.
Oh.
All I'm saying
I didn't know
is
your
like
dad worked for that division.
Yeah. Yeah. He worked in medicine for the Air Force.
This is such an Easter egg, dude. What?
This guy, you're right. Yeah. This guy, Walter Schreiber, was brought to the United States, brought to Texas, worked for the Air Force at Randolph Air Force Base. Like I said, my dad worked at Randolph Air Force Base. He worked in the medical field.
Fascinating.
In the Air Force. Turned around, contracted for Lockheed, for the Military Vaccine Agency, because I remember anytime I was with him when I was growing up and he answered his work phone, it's embedded into my brain. It was Military Vaccine Agency. This is Mr. Stoll. How can I help you? That was how he would answer his work phone all the time.
Whoa.
Military Vaccine Agency. This is Mr. Stoll. How can I help you?
Oh my gosh.
I'm not saying, like it says right here, working at the Air Force School of Medicine at Randolph Air Force Base in Texas. That's in San Antonio. 100%, I know that.
Hometown, baby.
Because I used to be on that base a lot growing up. So anyway, so that's where I'm saying, like, I don't know if there's like, this connection. I don't know.
It's not the world's biggest office. It's not like
yeah. I'm not saying
it's not like there's 4 million people in there. I'm not saying it isn't. I don't know. I'm just saying, like I said before, easy.
It looks like a duck. It quacks like a duck. I don't know if it's a duck, but I'm going to call it a duck.
It's duckish. It's very duckish. Okay, so you know more about this element of their research than I do. What was the status of vaccines? Do you know? Like, talking back post-war now, like, was this novel research or had vaccines already been established? I'm not sure myself.
I mean, vaccines had already been established. I don't know to the extent of...
Was it...
what
formally
what was,
though, or was it? Because I know there were some incidental vaccines, kind of, that like throughout, like we discovered that we were gaining resistances and stuff. But like in terms of a formal vaccine synthesized, were they the first doing it?
Germany?
Because I don't know. That's one thing I haven't really researched.
So I would not technically say that Germany was like
the founder,
like, hey, like, well, I wouldn't say they were like, hey, world, we figured out how to cure illnesses really, really well, and it will really eradicate them.
Oh, sure, yeah.
They definitely didn't do that.
It wasn't a philanthropic effort. Yeah. I just mean like...
But basically,
right.
The research that they conducted, like this guy, I'm sure there were others. I mean, like the human trials, like it's one of those things like blasting past those ethical and moral walls basically accelerates your research tenfold because you literally see in real time what happens when you inject this cocktail of stuff into this person. And like, when you don't give a shit about human life,
I mean, you dehumanize them effectively with all of the propaganda camps you were just talking about.
I mean, so it's
like a
like
lot of work done. Jeez.
Yeah. So I'm not. So basically, this guy comes over. I don't know the full details of it, but he contributes a lot to the vaccine program in the United States. I want to say he was the head, or he was going to be the head of it. Like, that's the type of area that's his expertise. Like, who knows how long he was doing that shit in Germany. I mean, I'm saying like 1935 maybe is your start time, because Hitler's already come to power, ramping up. They're already starting to do like really weird shit, probably more secretive. And then when the war breaks out, obviously they start doing shit behind their closed doors that's now known to the world. So it's like, I know there's other German doctors that, we like insta-killed, right? Because all that shit was really fucked up. This is one that we didn't insta-kill. This is one that we're like, okay, we'll take you. And again, this is one of the ones where I'm like, yeah, maybe we just like make him work for us and then like lock him up or something. Because like that shit's like fucked up. With just basically you concoct something. It's like, I'm giving this person this disease here, so I'm gonna see if they live after I give them this. Oh, they didn't? Okay, let's try again. I mean, like, and we're talking like on a scale of like, obviously like a Holocaust scale. So I literally like I don't know the body count, but it's atrocious. Like one's enough. One is atrocious within the medical field to this level, in my opinion.
Gosh,
but we're talking like, I mean,
our reality
like
now,
unfathomable.
Yeah, our reality now is like, you can't even sign your rights away legally in this country. You can't offer to be put in a study or test that's known to be lethal. You literally can't do it. We don't allow you to. Well, you could. It's only words on a paper, I guess, but you legally can't do it here. To think that like really not that long ago, in I guess you call it a first world nation, they were doing human trials in a magnitude of like the death toll is in a magnitude that is like incomprehensible. I know medical red tape is like super annoying because like, my dad's a physician and he's just like, I was like, his axe to grind his entire life. He hated that. And a lot of it's ridiculous. A lot of it's huge overreach in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion. But it's weird to think that like not that long ago there was no restrictions almost, depending on what country you lived in.
Well, there were restrictions. I think there was just this general base of like,
if you're a German citizen, there was restrictions.
Don't do trials to humans when in regards to medicine, because I think people were, obviously as humankind progressed from the older ages and human life became more valuable, which is a weird statement to say, but I think that's literally the case of what happened.
Statistics would back that up, by the way. Statistics do back that up.
I think, it was just like a general rule of thumb that like you don't trial humans. And Germany, obviously the Holocaust, they viewed the Jewish people as inhuman. And so if you have that view, then what you're doing to them is okay. And that's the kind of thing that I'm saying. It's like really, it's like fucked up. And this is one of the ones where I'm like, I don't really agree with it in what happened. Now, he didn't hold his post for very long. It says here, like, so he probably comes over in 45. It looks like in 51, he basically gets ousted. Like, he's kind of like working his thing, and then he gets ousted. Like, no, this guy is like No, he's like the,
Well, he has
the
to
real
be
bad
warped.
ones.
His mentality and the way he thinks about things, it was probably horrifying just to hear him talk, and he probably was so casual about things.
Oh yeah, probably.
I bet he's probably warped.
So, so this is where, like, I'm looking at it here. It says, so he gets ousted basically, and the United States sends him to Argentina on a U.S. military craft.
Yeah,
they're like, well, you got busted, buddy. Sorry. We could have used your research a little more, but yeah, it's a no-go because I guess you killed like a lot of people doing this research, and that's unethical. So
this sounds so silly coming out of your mouth, but that's what happened.
Yeah, and so they're like, so it's like, well,
It is what
we're
happened.
gonna send you Argentina, where all your Nazi buddies are. We'll just set you up there.
Yeah.
That's it.
By the way, if you've ever wondered why there's a lot of heavily German people coming out of South America, that's why.
Well, like as an aside, yeah, there's literal like only German communities with like their families have pictures of their grandfathers or whatever in SS uniforms, and they're like,
military fatigues.
That's Grandpappy. I love him. He was a great guy. Like that is a real thing. It's like a real thing. There's real communities that only speak German in Argentina.
That's where Giselle Bündchen comes out of. That is like, she came out of one of those communities. Like, not to look, guys, don't get the pitchforks out for Giselle. She didn't do anything. But I'm just saying, it's fascinating that the legacy, as bad as it was so forthright, and like, not just American culture, but the cultures of South America and a couple different safe havens around the world. It's like, wow. It's crazy that it's just, I'm realizing this is just a fascinating study on if you have a high, like, world-class level of ability in anything that people just deem important. Wow, people can look the other way on stuff. Wow.
Yeah.
Whether you're Aaron Hernandez in football and because you were a freak athlete and, you played amazingly, like, he was a monster. Like, well, he had CTE, but I'm just saying, like, it still happens. It's still very much a phenomenon. And like, dude, I guess, I don't know how we overcome that element of human nature, because I'm not going to say I'm above that. I'm sure I do that in little ways all the time, especially with like athletes and public figures, actors, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's like you could probably sift through all, different types of these scientists and, workers and officers and whatever. And you could say like, I guess that one's not that bad. And that one's really bad. Like we gave one where it's like, okay, well, it's really bad, but like, I guess the contributions was enough to like make you question it, I guess, make you be like, well, I guess in the grand scheme of things, it's, I hate to say okay, but like, that guy won a lot of stuff. Von Buren, or not Von Buren, but Von Braun, he won a lot of stuff. And the other guy, obviously, his was enough when it broke the public, broke out to the public. It was like, okay, yeah, not this guy. But like, that's where we're drawing the hard line.
Got to draw it somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
dude.
I mean, I don't know. It's crazy, but like there's just, a lot of other ones too that, it looks like there was a former head of Nazi intelligence operations hired by the U.S. Army and then later the CIA, a General Reinhard Gehlen.
I was just looking at that guy.
Operates 600 ex-Nazi agents in the Soviet zone in Germany. So basically he had... I'm just going to go out on a limb and say any type of Nazi intelligence operation was probably awful to humans.
I mean, they were masters at manipulating people. I'm not just saying their disdain and violence towards Jewish people. I mean, they were renowned. The British Secret Service, the OSS, they have a whole series of documents that studied how how Nazi operatives work, because they were the best at it. They just had this nefarious element to their like doctrine, their tactical doctrine, that was kind of never seen again. It was never recreated. Like it's really something. Another area of their expertise that kind of proportionally dwarfed the efforts of other nations at the time, and it really just came down to time, material, personnel was really the reason we won, man. It was a hotbed for a lot of stuff, a lot of advancements, and not all of them pretty and good, but there it is.
Yeah. So here's another one. It's on the CIA. It's on the CIA's website. I think it's a kind of I wouldn't say necessarily an excerpt, but it's in reference to the book. Again, I'll say the title: Operation Paperclip: The Secret Intelligence Program to Bring Nazi Scientists to America by Andy Jacobson. So here, check this one out. I'm going to read it verbatim again from the CIA website.
Let's go.
In 1949, the CIA created the Office of Scientific Intelligence. Its first director, Dr. Willard Mockley, traveled to Germany to set up a special program to interrogate Soviet spies. The CIA believed the Russians had developed mind control programs and wanted to know how U.S. spies would hold up against this capability if caught. So this guy's German, by the way. He's a Nazi. He's a former big Nazi guy.
Right.
So this guy also aimed to explore the feasibility of creating a Manchurian candidate through behavioral modification.
Is that where the term originated?
Or
is this article or whatever you're using just using that stylistically? I wonder.
It has it in quotes, so maybe not the origin,
Gotcha.
but so the Operation Bluebird was born. So Bluebird, later called MK Ultra, was a research activity experimenting in behavioral engineering of humans. And then there's this little segment right here. The Nuremberg Code prohibits experimentation with humans without their consent, because obviously that was a huge problem in Germany. So the last bit of it here says, during this program, Dr. Frank Olson, a U.S. Army biological weapons researcher, was given the drug LSD without his knowledge, leading to his death by leaping from a building.
Whoa.
DCI Richard Helms ordered much of the documentation destroyed, and the circumstances of his demise remain controversial to this day.
Wait, one more time. Who died from the LSD dose?
Dr. Frank Olson was a U.S. Army biological weapons researcher.
Wow.
So I'm going to go ahead and guess that basically what this is saying is, so this German guy becomes the head of this program, and I would almost say like a continuation of probably what they were already doing, the behavioral modification. I mean, we've talked about it, right? Like the Prorora, the indoctrination, it's like a German theme, manipulating, indoctrinating, all that thing. So this guy basically, the U.S. is like, hey, we need help with the Soviets. And he's like, okay, you mean I get to basically do what I was doing again? And the U.S. was like, well, not to that level, but also yes, because we don't like the Soviets.
Basically, it's like, here's your new office, man. Go for it.
So he's like, okay. And starts getting to work. And then, I mean, I think it's just funny that this whole Operation Bluebird, behavioral modification, Manchurian candidate thing, behavioral engineering of humans, like that's mentioned. And then literally right after that, it says the Nuremberg Code prohibits experimentation with humans without their consent. Just to preface that this U.S. Army biological weapons researcher was given LSD and then jumped off a building and killed himself. And it's like, then like all this documentation was destroyed, and it's like controversial about, these German guys running this program. It's just like, oh, come on, man. Like, dude. What?
One thing I would recommend to everybody listening, if you're not already in the rabbit hole, a great exercise is go just to the Operation Paperclip wiki, or any article about the operation. Go through the list of names. Wikipedia's it's nice because you can just click on links. But just go through all the names and just look up each name. And under all their, you'll get their whole history and all the horrible shit they did. And then once you get to their advances and the stuff they worked on, it's everywhere. Okay, Hans Ziegler. He comes under von Braun, one of his associates. He comes here in just a matter of years. He develops all of the electronics, is the lead on all of the electronics for satellites, radio relays, like satellite communications to Earth and back, and solar panels. He's the foremost. He didn't invent solar panels, but he was the reason why they were modernized and put on satellites. And those advances directly contributed to the solar panels that we have today that draw solar power for us. A small proportion of the grid still, but like very, very ideal for spacecraft that need perpetual energy. So like, just keep going through these names and you will see all around you, whether it's the highway system, refrigeration parts, electronics, interfaces, digital stuff, communications, cell towers, all of it. Like 70% chance, dealer's odds that one of these paperclip guys was instrumental in figuring it out. It's such an uncomfortable but like very real thing that these and to our earlier point, Ziegler, let's see what he gets. Meritorious Civilian Service Award by the Department of the Defense. World Pioneer in Communication and Satellite Solar Energy Systems. The highest award from the Army for exceptional civilian service. This is 10 years after the war? 10, 20 years after the war, he's getting these awards.
I guess if you pump enough good merit onto bad people, you'll cover up the bad with the good. Is that the thinking? Well, you also have to think, and look, we shouldn't always take things at face value. The military definitely had a PR interest in making these guys look squeaky clean because, again, they are making the choice to not even really harbor, to utilize the brains of these scientists and engineers. A lot of people are angry, as I mentioned. There was that decree that all those scientists signed, and obviously civilians weren't happy about it either. They had very much an interest in make these guys look as good as possible, so I'm sure a lot of these awards went into saving face and making them seem not so bad. But even still, like we also mentioned, it's definitely the power to recreate yourself or smooth things over just purely on the basis of your ability or your intellect. I mean, it's a strange power that humans seem to have. I mean, I could look through these all day, dude. There's a lot of people that contributed, I would say, a lot of good things that came from very bad origins, which
alchemy,
is like
alchemy.
is the crux of this entire situation. It's like, well, if we didn't control them in a good light, what would have happened if they ever fell into the Soviet hands, who were in the same vein as Germany almost, like they didn't give a shit about their people.
Yeah.
Like, I think it goes without saying, like, obviously, Hitler, the Holocaust, that was like 6 million lives lost.
Mm-hmm.
Stalin in Russia, I think it's 20 million.
That is such
died.
a good example of wow. You couldn't have picked a better example. So
it's just like,
yeah,
the frame of light, I guess, and obviously history gets to be written by the victors, It's a good case of that. But so it's like that, right? So you either take these people or Russia gets them. If you didn't know, Russia killed 20 million people like during Stalin's reign.
All sorts of ethnic cleansing too, not just the Jewish diaspora, but all sorts. And by other methods of classification too, like the infirm, the elderly, the weak, the neurodivergent, all sorts of people. And it's, gosh, dude, you couldn't have picked a better example, because it's like, I don't remember learning about that until way, way after the chapter on Nazi Germany. Like a decade later, I was like, wait a second, Stalin killed how many people? You just didn't know, because he was, at the time, his regime was an ally. So a lot of that stuff was glossed over. And like, again, their ability to help us win that front and completely shut down the Russian front for Germany was, I mean, indispensable. Like there's no way we win that war without the Russians. So, wow.
Yep.
Dude, I'm sitting here with you, but I can't help myself. I'm just looking at all of these.
The names and what they did are incredible, and then you read about how they kind of got there, and you're like, Yeah. So like another one that did some really probably fucked up shit in concentration camps. Theodor Benzinger.
What did he do?
Pilot and a physician. So he developed, let's see here, it says work on the effects of rapid decompression and related oxygen equipment. I believe he's the guy that created like the ear thermometer, which gives like one of the more accurate temperatures, because some relation to like taking a temp in the ear that's, obviously close to the brain, which the body is obviously protecting and temp controlling very heavily. Let's see what else. There was something else that he did. I think he was involved with, I think he sent a monkey up into space in a V2 rocket
that's him. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So
people forget they always attribute the dog to the Russians, but yeah, they were sending monkeys.
Well, he did that for the United States in 1948.
After the Russians did the dog, but still, it's like a lot of animals were going up there.
Yeah, but I mean, like they used a V2 rocket, like
modified one.
We had nothing else. It's like, well, we don't have anything for this yet, so we're not using these things for anything. We're not going to blow anybody up, so let's
They take out the ordnance, they take out the lethal part of it, and what do you know? The V2 rocket is pretty much space worthy. I'm sure they did modifications to work on it, but it's just crazy that like what is a land to land missile also worked amazingly well as a spacecraft.
Yeah, and just,
or the basis of a spacecraft.
And you think about, okay, so this guy was also a physician. He created the ear thermometer, which gives like the, whatever most accurate temperature, because it's in relation to, the brain or whatever. Yeah. Like, okay, how much fucked up shit did he have to do to figure that part out? Like, how many people died on that front? Because
that's
again, anything
so
like
dark.
medically, like medically related is like bad. Those guys didn't figure it out by like volunteers. Like, hey, do you want to help me out? Figure this out? Oh yeah, sure, doc. No, it was just like they had no choice. That's how bad it was. It was just so unethical. But again, it's the whole complex of like. I'm trying to think of the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Like, I guess how I want to approach this is like just something to make you think. Like sits there and like makes the wheels turn a little bit in a way that's like, it's not like fucked up, but it's hard to articulate, obviously. So you have these advancements in medicine and tech, all these things, obviously at great human expense. That's really really fucked up. If you take that away, or you say, okay, they do it the right way, right? Like what is the outlook of today's world Like, are we like way behind? Like, do we have answers for some of the things that we have now? Like I hate to say it, but it's like Germany did like the really fucked up thing that is awful and we all hate for like a generalized, I hate to say benefit, but like kind of like afterward.
There's something to chew on, yeah.
Yeah, and it's literally, it's like, how do you say that without sounding like,
horrible pro whatever? Yeah, I totally.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I wanted, like, I continually will preface.
That's why we created a podcast, so we could gently massage this into a conversation without being at a party and be like, hey, guess where vaccines come from? Yeah, I feel you.
And I mean, just like, oh my gosh, it's like if you just think about it and you just think like, okay, like where would this stuff be now without that type of research? And it's like so fucked up to think about, but at the same time, at least in my mind, it's like I don't know where we would be. Like, obviously we probably would have figured it out, but like maybe we wouldn't. Like, I don't know. Like I personally, I don't know. And like the more and more, as individual like media research, all these things, obviously in the social media platforms, which we talked about in the first episode, like it's this voice for all these different areas, places, people, etc. Like, through all like the bullshit noise, a lot more stuff keeps coming out about, like, in particular, like Nazi Germany. Like, those dudes were all over the world. That wasn't a homeland for like an allied power. Like, those dudes, like all like the Indiana Jones shit, all the like Antarctica, all like chasing.
Gosh, dude, their budget, like, their expeditionary relics, budget was like untold of. I remember. I don't want to misquote anything, so I'll say it vaguely. But they got like basically blank checks from starting with Hitler's regime and like even after the war, like to go to these places, and like they had these fantastic budgets to like recover things and like establish contact with other governments around the world, like you said. Like they were up to a lot of stuff that wasn't the war as well, or wasn't directly related to the war. And it's like, I don't know. Like, I hope more things come out about their exploits purely for the entertainment factor. It's staggering. And again, let me just say, I have to keep saying it.
Yeah.
Let this be a launching off point or something to chew on. It's like most huge advances were predicated on some sort of military or religious interest. That's just how it goes, man. Microbiology, like septic stuff, like that was all related to like Joseph Lister and like the end of the Civil War, like them discovering that, wow, maybe there are microorganisms and there's a whole other world that we can't see that's affecting, like our wounds. And that's where Joseph Lister like got the idea for antiseptic and all this stuff. Predicated on war. Highways, war. Solar panels, war. Like tons of healing practices, either war or religion. Like there's not many things that just like came about because someone was like, dang, how am I going to solve this visceral injury I have? Like, I don't know. It's strange. I would say this is not really a question you can even answer, but if I had to venture a guess, I would say we would be 50 years behind where we are. 100 years. There's no way to quantify it. There's no way to figure that out. But
I mean, it's
we're animals. We're little primates that like to fight one another and establish dominance, and we love to be on the top, man. And that little quirk of human nature drives all of this, all of the horror. All of the advancements, it's all wrapped under one ugly little ribbon.
And then on the flip side, you can say, like, well, when one particular place decides, like, we're all going to be on the same page, like, God, hate it, but just like look at what was accomplished. Like, fuck.
Yeah, that like on the same page, and a blatant disregard for a particular ethnic group and the willingness for slave labor. Don't forget that part. Also, wow, slave labor. I mean, at the center of many of humanity's greatest achievements or progress.
Yeah.
What the hell, man?
I just think it's like this one's like particularly bad because it's still, relatively speaking, it was not that long ago, and like a lot of the technologies.
Some of these guys are still alive.
Yeah, a lot of the technologies that we have are like that like they're based off of like these types of things. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's that's a tough pill to swallow, but like at the same time, I think, you know, just the more and more, as I said before, individual media and social media and all these things like allow for individuals to contribute to different findings and whatnot. Like I just like Nazi Germany, awful, terrible, fuck them. Nazi Germany, very interesting. What the fuck were they doing? And why do I want to know so much more about that stuff? Like that's like the crux, I feel like, because like the more and more you hear about it, like the whole South America, like across the world. And it's like, you know, nowadays, like now stuff's like breaking out. Like we've alluded to it before. We'll continue probably to talk about it, you know, in a future episode, is like ancient civilization stuff. Like,
yeah,
like completely like
that's
we're just now
I can't wait for that
episode. We're just like now piecing it together. But like what, like they found and brought all these different relics and whatnot. Like, where did they go? What happened to them? Like they did all that stuff. Then like
that's gonna be I don't know if you've heard, dude, because you know that's so much more something that you've looked into. I'm just gonna sit here and digest that. Dude.
I'm excited about that one. But like here's one like that I heard probably not that long ago. This one is like really like tinfoily hat, but like at the same time, when you take into consideration how scientifically advanced Germany was at the time, like is it that far-fetched? Like is it that far-fetched? Like so I guess there was like this, so like in South America, obviously there was like these people found like I think it was like either an old U-boat or something, and like it was like on top of like this tunnel, so it's like basically like above a secret base. So that like they go in, they find some, basically, long story short, they find like schematics about like I think it's like a moon base and like stuff like that, like space stuff. Yeah,
dude.
Yeah, and like at first you're like, okay, that's fucking bullshit. Like, no way. Like, no way.
On a theoretical level, though, it's not that crazy.
Well, I mean, let's think about it here. Like, we don't know the capacity of what, like, truly what the German scientific level was. Like, I think a lot probably still were, like, killed. A lot, you know, we directed their work. It's not, I feel like they probably wouldn't be like just pouring out all this information. Like they're just like, well, I'm an expert. And then the US is like, oh, we want this. They're like, okay, like that's fine. Like how many got out into Argentina? But like you think about it. So like Germany in the 40s, let's just entertain the idea, like schematics, possibility outline for like a moon base, or maybe there's one up there. So that's in the 40s. We think, so accelerate 20 years, which is really not that much longer after the 40s, is when we put someone on the moon. Yeah. How do we do it? We do it with German technology. We do it with their scientists. We do it with their minds.
Yeah.
So, and that is just like, we took like a couple of them. Like
they would have won the space race. Hands down, without, like, if you could somehow subtract the toll of World War II, they would have absolutely, completely got there way before us or the Russians.
Well, I mean, so, again, another interesting thing to think about is, like, without World War II and the context and and kind of like what Germany is during World War II, do they even get as innovative as they do?
You're right. It's inexorably linked. You're right.
It's like, I don't know. I just think this stuff is just like so crazy to think about. But like I said, like maybe it feels a little more like tinfoily, right? Like this whole moon thing. But the bases in South America or like these German communities, that's real. Like I think for a long time people thought it's a myth, it's not a myth, you know, like it wasn't like concrete. But now today it's like, oh no. There are literal white people, German only speaking towns in Argentina, and if you go into their house and you look at Grandpappy on the wall, he's got the SS skulls on his uniform, smiling, and they're like, yeah, we love that guy. And then there's all these rumors swirling about, you know, Hitler kill himself. Did he get out? Did he get to Argentina? Like, his whole death thing is like, well, we're pretty sure he killed himself, and then like they lit his body on fire. But like, it's not like
it's difficult
100%. It's not like, yes, he did that. It's like some say he did, and some say he didn't.
We don't have his remains, or we don't have intact remains. But yeah, I mean, what's difficult about like this base, the moon base, but also the circumstances of his death, and like, did he actually? The problem is, as I said earlier, late stage war for the Germans was a fever dream because the top echelon was headed by this guy who was a meth addict for real and was kind of semi-hallucinating and like had sort of a psychosis definitely had a psychosis going on. So who knows what he requisitioned and like who knows what he was ordering. And like, yeah, I totally believe that they were drafting up a moon base. Whether or not they were able to like execute on that, who knows? But it's not that far-fetched. It's really not because, like I said, like, and you also mentioned, he wasn't being very practical towards the end. He was really losing out on a lot of practical decision-making because he was so hung up on making his King Tiger and his jet planes and his what we would eventually call ICBMs, and he wanted all these like mega death weapons, and he wanted his war machine to be so much more than just an army. He wanted it to be a veritable sci-fi wonder and a nightmare for his enemies. So I'm not surprised that he's like, make the moon base before the war is over. Like, that makes sense to me, dude. That's kind of what his mental space was just like, what's the most outlandish military war machine we can make? Oh, let's do it. Go. Here's all of our money.
The capacity to be able to even like actually
kind of get there,
it is insane. It's like it's like a question of, okay, well, maybe they could have, but like at the same time, then I just think there's just so much shrouded because it's like now we kind of know about the Argentina Nazi Germany thing, right? Like we all, I think. I hate to say all, but I feel like it's more general common knowledge now than it was before that like Nazis escaped to Argentina. There's big communities there. They did it. They made it, etc. They're finding different things there now. But like, so it's like, obviously like what other secrets were taken there. And like, I don't think, especially towards the end, like I think obviously Hitler was in charge, but also at the same time, like, do we think he was in a mental state to propel this evacuation to Argentina, or like was there like a contingency plan? Like,
probably. I mean,
what was going on there? Like, there's all these bright minds. Maybe there were other. Maybe it was like a directive of some kind, and like how many secrets got taken there? And it's just like, maybe we'll never know. I don't know. It's like another rabbit hole, right? But just like I just think it's just so crazy. Just obviously the shroud that is this awful time in history, but also all the good that came out of it, and then all the things that continually just kind of like trickle into, you know, the media sphere, if you will. And like, if you're not like, it's not going to be something like every day that just bang, pops up and you're like, oh shit, look at that. It's like, literally, it's like it's like obscured. It's like, it's just kind of like shrouded still, but like it's there. And if like you look for it, you know.
Yeah, if those secrets are out there, they're definitely cocooned within these families you're talking about, which I'm aware of, that there is still some of that weird pride and left over, like you said, where they still have pictures up and stuff. So who knows? Hey, if you're an Argentine listener and you have any knowledge of this, please, we're desperate to know. Guys, look, if you want to have some more dives with us, some more of these rabbles, you want to hear about these ancient civilizations, stuff happening in the Arctic, whatever happened to the lost secrets of World War II, guess what, dude? We're going to be talking about this, but not in this episode, because we got so many more topics to cover, and we are literally, I hope this convinces you we're bursting at the seams to talk about this stuff, because this is all Austin and I do. We just go, oh, dude. So please, if you liked Operation Paperclip, if you like the general vibe we're going for here, dude, you gotta join the crew. You gotta get on the submarine, and you gotta dive with us, because this is what we're going to be doing. It won't always be this intense of a subject matter. Not that it got that intense today, but you know, some might be a little more goofy, some might be a little more technical, some might be a little more mysterious, more on the fringes of what's real, what's not real. Who knows, dude? But we're excited to be bringing more of this to you. Austin, bring us home, dude.
I mean, I don't know if there's much to bring home. I just, you know, the more I talk about this kind of stuff, the more my own head keeps spinning. Like, I just think it's, you know, I think this stuff is crazy, and you know, it's so interesting, and I think we're just in a unique spot now and today where information is just so easily obtainable that this stuff is just like bubbling to the surface. And you know, while it's not mainstream, you know, I just find it so interesting the impact that these types of things have, like on our world and on our society. And you know, if you were to remove that, what would it look like? And I think there's more of that out there than we really think. Like, we just think like, oh, we just trudged along and figured it out. It's like, I mean, yes, we did, but at the same time, like like obviously today, the things that came out of an awful thing, a very awful thing that we have to like semi-tiptoe around and talk about, is just, I just think it's just so incredibly fascinating. And you know, I just continually, like Connor said, I think the goal of this podcast is not to say like, hey, this is how it is, this is what it is.
To convince you is not persuasive. Right. No.
It's just get the head spinning. I want people to be like, huh, wow. And you know, either look it up or be like, wow, I wonder what they're going to talk about next. Right. So, you know, just excited about all the different things that we're talking about. Obviously, like, you know, first episode was social media. Today was Nazi Germany.
Paperclip, yeah.
Yeah, you know, post World War II stuff. You know, we're all over the place, but that's what makes it fun. And I'm certainly excited to bring that kind of head spinning information to everybody.
Join the crew. See you on the next episode.